What's going on, guys? Welcome back. It is Obsessed Turf, and man, has it been a while. Between my work schedule, it has kept me preoccupied, if you might say, and then the heat. Guys, the heat and humidity have been insane. And then if I'm being completely honest, my yard started off great and it took an absolute beating. I had a hard time trying to figure out what exactly was going on, all of which to say that it ultimately ended up being POA. You may have heard this before, the light green spots in your yard, the different colors of grass that are in your yard. Sometimes that can be different grass types, but other times it can be a weedy grass, and that turns out what the problem was with me. I'll probably get into a POA video with you guys as far as what that looks like and how you can address it, because I am in the middle of working on addressing that issue. But my approach is going to be manual removal. I spent a lot of time and effort trying to manually remove a lot of POA trivialis is what I had. It wasn't the annual, it was the trivialis. And so went out and removed a lot of that, but we are in the midst of a fall reno. Been doing a lot of work on that, and that is pretty much what I'm going to go over with you guys today, trying to get the lawn back into health, because unlike last year, if you saw my previous video on fall renovation, that was actually a really good one just to kind of rejuvenate the lawn and not necessarily repair. This is definitely a repair season for me, and I'm actually I'm feeling very optimistic because I pretty much went all in on it. And my timing was perfect because the weather forecast for the next week or two seems to be really, really good and conducive for overseeding and reseeding bare areas in my lawn. So to start things off, you know, the beginning of the year started out great. We had a lot of green response in the lawn. There was a lot of delay in what I could do because I was doing a soil test. I'm going to go over and I have a soil test video that I'm going to go over with you, and the differences between the different types of soil tests that you should and maybe should not be using. Long story short, guys, lots of stuff that was learned this year that I can't wait to share with you guys. If you have watched any of my previous videos, I went into doing a lot of planning for the 2025 season, and I had a full schedule, and I stuck to that schedule until things went south. Ultimately, guys, what I learned from everything that I've been doing this year is that the more you put into your lawn and the better your lawn looks, the more of the imperfections that will be amplified in your lawn. So that's how I discovered this POA this year. I've had POA for a long time, I know it, but it wasn't until this year when I really had a structured plan to have an ideal lawn and to really make the lawn the best that it has ever been. It really amplified and magnified the existence of the POA trivialis in my lawns, because with POA trivialis, it has a shallow root system and it will be the first to go dormant under a well-manicured lawn. So like I said, it stuck out like a sore thumb and it made it very obvious, and it was something that I knew that I had to take care of if I wanted to continue to have a great lawn going forward in the future. So I did have to take a step back. I hit the pause button and said, you know what, I need to further identify all of the POA trivialis that exists throughout the entire yard so that I could expose it and then take care of it. And if you guys are interested in that, hit the comment below. But in this video, we're going to really talk about what my lawn reno plan was this year and the different steps that I took, not only from recovery from the POA trivialis removal, but also a renovation or an overseed. So it's important to understand that every 2 to 3 years at the most, you should consider overseeding your lawn. And I should also point out is that the quality of the seed that you get is super, super important. For the longest time, I have invested in high quality cultivars. I had learned early on that if you want to have a very nice looking lawn and you're trying to step up the appearance of your lawn, you have to get into the more elite cultivars that are, you know, in all these in-depth trials and all that are scoring high for color, drought resistance, disease resistance, and all of that. So it's important that you're putting down the right seed, but it's also important that you have the right fertilization program and the right soil for your lawn to continue to thrive and to minimize the issues that you can have in your lawn as much as possible. Understand you are not going to be able to eliminate any and all issues in your lawn. It's Mother Nature. Mother Nature always wins. However, when you're going into a lawn reno, just understand that overseeding is a common thing if you're trying to keep up a nice lawn. Now, some exceptions to that might be Kentucky bluegrass. Kentucky bluegrass, if the majority of your lawn is Kentucky bluegrass, it has the knitting effect, if you will, right? It has rhizomes that will go under the ground and that it will grow into the bare areas. So those are things that are going to be helpful for you long term. But if you're dealing with any of the other grass types in cool season, by the way, this is all cool season stuff. Other cool season grasses are going to be your fescues, whether that's turf type tall fescue, fine fescue, etc. And then your perennial ryegrass. Those are going to require more frequent overseeding to continue to have a dense lawn. And even going back to the Kentucky bluegrass, I still think that every 2 to 3 years at the most, you're going to be wanting to do an overseed, if nothing else, just to introduce the more current elite cultivars to your lawn to continue to improve the lawn over time. So to go back to my renovation, whether again, you have done any sort of eradication of weed spots in your lawn, maybe you're just having some basic thinning in your lawn and you want to help improve the density of your lawn, it's going to be in the order for lawn renovation. I love the fall to do this. This is the opportune time to do it. So before we got into doing any of the fall reno, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know what my staple is for lawn maintenance every single fall, and that is core aeration. I don't care if you don't do anything else to your lawn other than watering and mowing it, at least core aerate it. I would recommend doing some fertilization, but even more than fertilization, you should be core aerating your lawn. Core aeration is fantastic because it allows oxygen, nutrients, and water to get down into the root system, down into the soil with the holes that the core aeration creates in your soil. It's beautiful for your lawn. Do not skip that step. A side note is that core aeration also helps with thatch. So if you have any sort of thatch issues, if you do regular core aeration at least once a year, you will not have issues with thatch, or you likely won't. The very first thing that I did after the POA, because we'll get past that, we've already talked about that. The very first thing that I did is I had a bunch of bare patches in the lawn. So I went through and I wanted to top dress all of those bare patches in the lawn. So what I did is I bought some Scott's lawn soil. I'm curious to know how this is going to work. I think it's going to be okay, but I put a very thin layer of Scott's lawn soil over all of the bare patches in the yard. And that again was where I had pulled the Poa trivialis from. And that took me the better part of a day to put down the lawn soil. So the next day I came out and I put down grass seed. Now I had Kentucky bluegrass that I had already bought for a nimblewill patch that I had nuked last fall, and it came in great. But one of the things that I wanted to do for the fall overseed this year is that I wanted to do predominantly turf type tall fescue. In my lawn, I have roughly 50-50 between turf type tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass. And what I wanted to do with this blend, I'd read a lot of great things about Twin City Seeds Blue Resilience, which is 90% turf type tall fescue and 10% Kentucky bluegrass. So I went ahead with that mix. However, I had the better part of 10-pound bag from last fall's reseed of the nimblewill patch, and I wanted to just go ahead and mix that into the Blue Resilience seed that I had already had. That would then made it roughly about 65-35 between turf type tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass seed. I then mixed that all up into my wheelbarrow, got that all mixed up and nicely combined. And then I put that back into the Blue Resilience bag. And then I went around and I spread that seed. So one of the biggest things, guys, when you're spreading your seed and you're doing a fall overseed is that you want to ideally do that in 2 passes. The first pass, you'll go one direction. In this case, I did east to west. And then in the second pass, you're going north to south. One of the biggest factors you'll have to determine is the spreader setting for your spreader. It's going to vary based on not only the seed, but also your spreader. So you got to try to figure that out, understanding that the turf type tall fescue seed is larger than the Kentucky bluegrass seed. So you do have to kind of feel it out, try to play around with the settings. What I would recommend is maybe doing a small section of your yard. After you get used to your spreader, you kind of know how at the rate that it's coming out, if it's going to be too much or too little. Best thing to do though is to start with too little. You can always open your spreader up to a higher setting. and put the seed out a little faster if you're finding that the seed is not coming out fast enough for you. But keep in mind that you want to do this in 2 passes. So what I did is I took my seed, which was 23 pounds of seed, and I split that up into 2 11.5-pound increments. And then I was able to know that when I ran out the first 11.5 pounds, then I could do the second 11.5 pounds. The great thing about that is that you're doing half of your seed first, and then you're able to determine and calibrate your spreader accordingly. Little side note, if you know that you're going to continue to apply the same products year after year, make yourself a little log so that you can remember this. That's what I've been doing, just to kind of keep track as far as what my spreader settings should be for the types of product or products that I'm putting down. So after the seed was down, we want to lightly rake that in. Now, this actually ended up serving 2 purposes, and I didn't even realize it, but when I was lightly raking it in, the main purpose is to get that seed to settle. When you drop the seed, it's very light. It's going to sit on top of the canopy of the grass. And your goal here is, when you're doing the light raking over the yard, is that is going to disturb and shake the grass and the seed enough to hopefully get some of that seed to fall further down into the canopy, because your goal is for that seed to make it down to the soil, because you can't have seed germination without seed to soil contact. So your primary goal is to get that seed to the soil, or as close to the soil as possible, before you start to irrigate, because hopefully at that point then the irrigation and the water will continue to push that seed down to make soil contact and give you germination of your seed. And another thing that is really helpful with the light raking, that it was a secondary benefit from doing the light raking, is because of the core aeration. You may recall, as I mentioned, the thatch layer, it helps with dethatching. Well, some of that thatch will make it to the surface, and it's just kind of dead grass, just kind of sitting there on the canopy on the very top of the lawn. So by doing this light raking to help get the seed to settle a little bit more, we're also pulling up some of that dead grass that came up as a result of the aeration. So it's a win-win. It's kind of a double benefit there. So that's nice. So after we had the seed down, we wanted to protect that seed from washout, help retain moisture, and to protect from birds eating the seed. So what I then did is I put a very, very thin layer of peat moss over the seed and the lawn soil, just to help to retain a little bit of that moisture. It's super important that your seeds do not dry out, and this is my approach in attempt to make sure that that does not happen. I'm a little concerned about using too much peat moss, because it can dry out and crust over and have some hydrophobic properties to it, and that's what we want to avoid. So you do not want to overdo it with this, because you don't want to smother the seed, and you don't want to create that crusty layer of the peat moss as it's drying and getting moist and drying, and it starts to kind of have a crusty texture to it. I think I do like the peat moss a little bit better than straw, simply because peat moss tends to stay put a little bit easier. It doesn't blow around from the wind as easy as the straw does, and it biodegrades and it breaks down a lot easier than straw. So in my opinion, I like the peat moss to help primarily retain the moisture at a longer interval, and then also, you know, protect it from the environment, from the elements, mainly the birds. So after the seed was lightly raked in, we were ready to put down starter fertilizer. So starter fertilizer is going to be a really good thing for the seeding more than anything. You're trying to establish and create a good fertilized environment for your seed to germinate and thrive. Those little seedlings are going to be very hungry, and they're going to be experiencing a lot of rapid growth, and they are energy hogs. They want as much nourishment as possible. The more that you can give them, of course within reason, the better. And oftentimes what you want to do is you want to split up your starter fert to where you're putting in a certain amount that you can break up into 2 feedings, so that you can make sure that that seed is getting consistent fertilization. I myself used the Let's Go 18-24-12 starter fertilizer, and the 24 is the phosphorus. That is the primary thing that you want. Sure, I understand that phosphorus, you want to hold off on that, and personally I do limit phosphorus applications in all of my fertilization programs throughout the year, but the exception for me is going to be when I overseed. I want that phosphorus to help with root establishment. So then after the starter fertilizer is down, then we are going into one last product that I like to use, and this is CarbonProG. This is a fantastic product. I do truly believe in it. Despite the proof that I may or may not have from it, the science behind it, the microbial activity, and if nothing else, that biochar, I'm all in, guys. This is roughly a 50-50 biochar and compost mixture that they have put together and pelletized so that you can spread it easily. And my rule of thumb is 80 pounds of this stuff in the fall, whatever I'm doing. This is part of my fall program. It doesn't matter if I'm overseeding or what type of fertilizer program I'm going to do, because you really can't overdo it with biochar and compost. So I put 80 pounds of this CarbonProG across my 4,600 square foot lawn. It's the second year I've done it. I just really believe in this stuff. I think it will do a great job with helping with amending the soil, creating a much richer soil, and also helping with the water retention as a result of the biochar products. But that extra thing with the microbial benefits that it can provide because of the compost material, it's got my nod of approval. So after that, guys, it was on to getting the lawn irrigated. We are done with the application of lawn prep, and we've got to keep this soil moist. So the first couple of days, the primary thing that I wanted to do is check my watering coverage. I wanted to make sure that I was getting good coverage and moisture on all of the lawn. And here's a nice little side benefit of using peat moss. When it gets dry, it gets a lighter shade in color, kind of gets a dark tan color. When it's wet or moist, it is dark, almost black. So that's the thing that I really like about peat moss, is that if my irrigation is missing at all and there are any dry spots, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And from there, I'm able to then adjust my sprinkler heads to make sure that I've got proper coverage on everything and making sure that all of that seed is staying moist. This other thing that we have to do is then think about how many times do we need to water throughout the day to keep that moist. You want to avoid oversaturating. You don't want to have any standing water. But you do want to make sure that you have a moist seed bed so that you can continue to have those seeds germinate properly. So what I do is I go out and I keep an eye on things, especially that first couple of days. I'm walking around, I'm looking at the peat moss to see, is it drying out? Is it dry to the touch? I started out with 2 watering cycles. I had one at 8:30 and another one at 2:30, realized that that was too long of a time frame, but also knew and recognized that some areas, especially my shaded parts of my lawn, tend to stay moist a little bit longer. So you do have to play around with those and understand where your hot spots are, where your dry spots are, and where the areas that are taking longer to dry out, so that you don't over or under water in specific areas. So it's a little bit technical, and you just kind of have to be very mindful and attentive to where the areas are that need the moisture and make sure that you find the balance. And there's really no trick to that, guys. You just need to go out and look at that and keep an eye on things until you get it down. The good news is that with Turf Type Talk Fescue, you get germination in 5 to 7 days. Unfortunately, though, it can take up to 3 to 4 weeks for Kentucky bluegrass to kick in. So the ultimate goal here, guys, is to stay off the lawn and allow that seed to germinate and get to about 3 to 3.5 inches or so before your first mow, and make sure that mower blade is sharp. This is where we're at right now, guys. I'll definitely keep you posted on how things are developing, but I have some other things that I'm going to be going over here in the future. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any questions whatsoever, please feel free to put those in the comments below, and it would be very, very much appreciated if you could like and subscribe, and hopefully we can get some more videos. Things are getting a little more under control, so I should be able to get more videos out to you on a regular basis. But until next time, I'll see you. Take care, guys.